Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you very much for joining today. We'd like to welcome you all, seek blessings of the Lord Jesus, Radha Krishna, Gaunitai, Srila Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj, and also the assembled Vaishnavas. So today we are on the third canto, sixth chapter, which is the beginning of the creation pastimes, creation of the universal form. So I'd like to welcome Shruti. Hare Krishna, Shruti.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Fantastic. So you are welcome to do any invocation you like.
Of course, Prabhuji. And how many
Oh,
verses?
5. Yes, 5 first. 5
The
verses.
first 5. Okay.
Maybe Surinder, would you like to read if you're able to?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat, Nitai Gaura Haribol.
Okay, good. So,
Yeah,
okay.
Okay, Prabhuji. Om Namo Narayanaaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. ऋषिरुवाच इति तासां स्वशक्तीनां सतीनाम् असमेत्य सह प्रसुप्तलोकतन्त्राणां निशाम्य गतिम् ईश्वरः.
The Rishi Maitreya said, the Lord thus heard about the suspension of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as Mahatattva.
कालसञ्ज्ञां तदा देवीं बिभ्रच्छक्तिम् उरुक्रमः त्रयोविंशतितत्त्वानां गणं युगपदाविशत्.
The Supreme Powerful Lord then simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with the goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements.
सोऽनुप्रविष्टो भगवान् चेष्टारूपेण तं गणं भिन्नं संयोजयाम् आस सुप्तं कर्म प्रबोधयन्.
Thus, when the personality of Godhead entered into the elements by his energy, all the living entities were enlivened into different activities, just as one is engaged in his work after awakening from sleep.
प्रबुद्धकर्मा दैवेन त्रयोविंशतिको गणः प्रेरितो जनयत् स्वाभिर्मात्राभिरधिपूरुषम्.
When the 23 principal elements were set in action by the will of the Supreme, the gigantic universal form, or the Vishwarup body of the Lord, came into existence.
परेण विशता स्वस्मिन् मात्रया विश्वसृग्गणः चुक्षोभान्योन्यमासाद्य यस्मिन् लोकाश्चराचराः.
As the Lord in his plenary portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into the gigantic form in which all the planetary systems and all movable and immovable creations rest.
Prabhuji, you're muted.
Thank you so much. So, yeah, just saying this chapter deals with the creation of the universal form, how Vishnu enters into the elements. having heard of the suspension of the creative process. So it's suspended because it needs the glance, it needs the Lord to enter into it. Lord Vishnu enters the 23 elements together with Kali Mata, Maya Devi, and he enlivened the living entities into activity, and the elements became transformed into the gigantic universal form, or the Vishwarup, body of the Lord. So this is going to be a little technical. This is like the secondary creation. The primary creation is when the Lord breathes out as Mahavishnu. And then the secondary creation is within every universe he enters, and through the agency of Lord Brahma, this begins creation. Okay.
How many verses in the next bit?
That's a good question. Just one second. Up to 10.
Okay. हिरण्मयः स पुरुषः सहस्रपरिवत्सरान् आण्डकोश उवासाप्सु सर्वसत्त्वोपबृंहितः.
The gigantic Virat Purusha, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him.
स वै विश्वसृजां गर्भो देवकर्मात्मशक्तिमान् विभाजात्मनात्मानम् एकधा दशधा त्रिधा.
The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rup divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity, and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively.
एष ह्यशेष सत्त्वानाम् आत्मांश परमात्मनः आद्योऽवतारो यत्रासौ भूतग्रामो विभाव्यते.
The gigantic universal form of the Supreme Lord is the first incarnation and plenary portion of the Supersoul. He is a self of an unlimited number of living entities, and in him rests the aggregate creation, which thus flourishes.
साध्यात्म साधि दैवश्च साधिभूत इति त्रिधा विराट् प्राणो दशविध एकधा हृदयेन च.
The gigantic universal form is represented by 3, 10, and 1 in the sense that he is the body and the mind and the senses. He is a dynamic force for all movements by 10 kinds of life energy, and he is the one heart where life energy is generated.
स्मरन् विश्वसृजाम् ईशो विज्ञापितम् अधोक्षजः विराजम् अतपत् स्वेन तेजसैषां विवृत्तये.
The Supreme Lord is a supersoul of all the demigods entrusted with the task of constructing the cosmic manifestation. Being thus prayed to by the demigods, he thought to himself and thus manifested the gigantic form for their understanding.
Okay, so very good. This universal form of the Lord is the total energy of the Mahatattva, which he divides into. So Mahatattva is the sort of undivided material energy in total. And then he divides it into the Jiva Shakti, the consciousness of the living entity, Prana Shakti, the life airs, Atma Shakti, the self-identification. These three are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. So the 1 is the heart, where the life energy is generated. The 3 is the Adhyatma, bodies, mind, and senses. And the 10 is the Adhibhuta, gross organs and the sense objects. So gross organs, so these are gross elements, the earth, water, fire, air, ether. So this Virat Roop is the first incarnation of Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. So who is Garbhodakshaya Vishnu? The first original Vishnu is Mahavishnu, also known as Karana Dakshaya Vishnu, who breathes out. When he breathes out, all the universes come out of the pores of his skin. And into every universe expands the second Vishnu, Garbho Dakshaya Vishnu. And he is lying on the casual ocean, and from him the lotus comes, lotus flower, and on top of that lotus flower is Lord Brahma, first created living entity. So all of this to take place, this Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is the one who initiates it, his glances, he is the one who brings everything to life. Okay, so next is up to 22.
Okay, Prabhuji.
Okay. And first.
अथ तस्याभितप्तस्य कतिधायतनानिह निरभिद्यन्तदेवानां तानि मे गदतः शृणु.
Maitreya said, "You may now hear from me how the Supreme Lord separated himself into the diverse forms of the demigods after the manifestation of the gigantic universal form.
तस्याग्निरास्यं निर्भिन्नं लोकपालो विशत्पदं वाचा स्वांशेन वक्तव्यं ययासौ प्रतिपद्यते.
Agni or heat separated from his mouth, and all the directors of material affairs entered into it in their respective positions. By that energy, the living entity expresses himself in words.
निर्भिन्नं तालो वरुणो लोकपालो विशद्धरेः जिह्वायां शेन चरसं ययासौ प्रतिपद्यते.
When the palette of the gigantic form was separately manifested, Varuna, the director of water in the planetary systems, entered therein, and thus the living entity has the facility to taste everything with his tongue.
निर्भिन्ने अश्विनौ नासे विष्णोराविशतां पदं घ्राणेनांशेन गन्धस्य प्रतिपत्तिर्यतो भवेत्.
When the Lord's two nostrils separately manifested themselves, the jewel Ashwini Kumaras entered them in their proper positions, and because of this, the living entities can smell the aromas of everything.
निर्भिन्ने अक्षिणी त्वष्टा लोकपालो विशद्विभोः चक्षुषांशेन रूपाणां प्रतिपत्तिर्यतो भवेत्.
Thereafter, the two eyes of the gigantic form of the Lord were separately manifested. The sun, the director of light, entered them with a partial representation of eyesight, and thus the living entities can have vision of forms.
निर्भिन्नान्यस्य चर्माणि लोकपालो निलो विशत् प्राणेनांशेन संस्पर्शम् येनासौ प्रतिपद्यते.
When there was a manifestation of skin separated from the gigantic form, Anila, the deity directing the wind, entered the partial touch, and thus the living entities can realize tactile knowledge.
कर्णावस्य विनिर्भिन्नौ धिष्ण्यं स्वं विविशुर्दिशः श्रोत्रेणांशेन शब्दस्य सिद्धिं येन प्रपद्यते.
When the ears of the gigantic form became manifested, all the controlling deities of the directions entered into them with the hearing principles, by which all the living entities hear and take advantage of sound.
त्वचम् अस्य विनिर्भिन्नं विविशुर्धिष्ण्यम् ओषधिः अंशेन रोमभिकण्डूम् ये रसौ प्रतिपद्यते.
When there was a separate manifestation of skin, the controlling deities of sensations and their different parts entered into it, and thus the living entities feel itching and happiness due to touch.
मेढ्रं तस्य विनिर्भिन्नं स्वधिष्ण्यं क उपाविशत् रेतसांशेन येनासा आनन्दं प्रतिपद्यते.
When the genitals of the gigantic form separately became manifest, then Prajapati, the original living creature, entered into them with his partial semen, and thus the living entities can enjoy sex pleasure.
गुदं पुंसो विनिर्भिन्नं मित्रो लोकेश आविशत् पायुनांशेन येनासौ विसर्गं प्रतिपद्यते.
The evacuating channels separately became manifest, and the director named Mitra entered into it with partial organs of evacuation. Thus the living entities are able to pass stool and urine.
हस्तावस्य विनिर्भिन्ना इन्द्रः स्वर्पतिराविशत् वातयांशेन पुरुषो यया वृत्तिं प्रपद्यते.
Thereafter, when the hands of the gigantic form separately became manifested, Indra, the ruler of the heavenly planets, entered into them, and thus the living entity is able to transact the business for his livelihood.
पादावस्य विनिर्भिन्नौ लोकेशो विष्णुराविशत् गत्या स्वांशेन पुरुषो यया प्राप्यं प्रपद्यते.
Thereafter, the legs of the gigantic form separately became manifest, and the demigod named Vishnu, not the personality of Godhead, entered with partial movement. This helps the living entity move to his destination.
So now we see the manifestation of the different demigods. The Supreme Lord then manifested the demigods connected with the active principal parts of his body, thus enabling the living entities to also manifest the functions of the senses, both knowledge acquiring and active senses. So all the different demigods came from different parts of his body. And because of that activation, the senses of the living entity also get active. So we are able to taste, talk, work, etc., etc. Quite detailed, but and quite complex as well. Oh, so now how many verses? Up to 34.
34. Okay, बुद्धिं चास्य विनिर्भिन्नां वागीशो धिष्ण्यम् आविशत् बोधेनांशेन बोद्धव्यं प्रतिपत्तिर्यतो भवेत्.
When the intelligence of the gigantic form separately became manifest, Brahma, the Lord of the Vedas, entered into it with a partial power of understanding, and thus an object of understanding is experienced by the living entities.
हृदयं चास्य निर्भिन्नं चन्द्रमाधिष्ण्यम् आविशत् मनसांशेन येनासौ विक्रियां प्रतिपद्यते.
After that, the heart of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered the moon demigod with partial mental activity. Thus, the living entity can conduct his mental speculations.
आत्मानं चास्य निर्भिन्नम् अभिमानो विशत्पदं कर्मणां शेन येनासौ कर्तव्यं प्रतिपद्यते.
Thereafter, the materialistic ego of the gigantic form separately manifested itself, and into it entered Rudra, the controller of false ego, with his own partial activities by which the living entity transacts his objective actions.
सत्त्वं चास्य विनिर्भिन्नं महान्धिष्ण्यम् उपाविशत् चित्तेनांशेन येनासौ विज्ञानं प्रतिपद्यते.
Thereafter, when his consciousness separately manifested itself, the total energy, Mahatattva, entered with his conscious part. Thus, the living entity is able to conceive specific knowledge.
शीर्ष्णोऽस्य द्यौर्धरापद्भ्यां खं नाभेरुदपद्यत गुणानां वृत्तयो येषु प्रतीयन्ते सुरादयः.
Thereafter, from the head of the gigantic form, the heavenly planets were manifested, and from his legs, the earthly planets, and from his abdomen, the sky separately manifested themselves. Within them, the demigods and others also were manifested in terms of the modes of material nature.
आत्यन्तिकेन सत्त्वेन दिवं देवा प्रपेदिरे धरां रजः स्वभावेन पणयो ये च ताननु.
The demigods, qualified by the super excellent quality of the mode of goodness, are situated in the heavenly planets, whereas the human beings, because of the nature in the mode of passion, live on the earth in company with their subordinates.
तार्तीयेन स्वभावेन भगवन्नाभिम् आश्रिताः उभयोरन्तरं व्योम ये रुद्रपार्षदां गणाः.
Living entities who are associates of Rudra develop in the third mode of material nature, or ignorance. They are situated in the sky between the earthly planets and the heavenly planets.
मुखतो वर्तत ब्रह्म पुरुषस्य कुरुद्वः यस्तून्मुखत्वाद् वर्णानां मुख्यो भूद् ब्राह्मणो गुरुः.
O chief of the Kuru dynasty, the Vedic wisdom became manifested from the mouth of the Virat, the gigantic form. Those who are inclined to this Vedic knowledge are called Brahmanas, and they are the natural teachers and spiritual masters of all the orders of society.
बाहुभ्यो वर्तत क्षत्रं क्षत्रियस्तदनुव्रतः यो जातस्त्रायते वर्णान् पौरुषः कण्टकक्षतात्.
Thereafter, the power of protection was generated from the arms of the gigantic Virat form, And in relation to such power, the Kshatriyas also came into existence by following the Kshatriya principle of protecting society from the disturbance of thieves and miscreants.
Visho vartant tasyorvor lokavrittikarir vibhoh vaishyastad udbhavo vartam nranam yah samavartayat.
The means of livelihood of all persons, namely production of grains and their distribution to the prajas, was generated from the thighs of the Lord's gigantic form. The mercantile men who take charge of such execution are called Vaishyas.
Padbhyam bhagavato jatnye shushruषा dharma siddhaye tasyam jatah pura shudro yadvrittya tushyate harihi.
Thereafter, service was manifested from the legs of the personality of Godhead for the sake of perfecting the religious function, situated on the legs of the Sudras to satisfy the Lord by service.
Ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibhihi.
All these different social divisions are born with their occupational duties and living conditions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master.
Thank you. Let's go to very brief summary. So we see how the development of planets took place, how the demigods live in the heavens and we live on earth due to our nature, and also how the souls came, how the Varnas were created from the universal form, from the head, Brahmins, the arms, Kshatriyas, the stomach was the Vaishya, legs were the Shudras. The Supreme Lord continued to manifest more subtle elements of creation along with their deities. Thus, qualities such as understanding, speculation, action were created. He also manifested the planetary systems and the four Varnas. Okay, so the Brahmins come from the mouth because they've got wisdom, head, Kshatriyas from the arms, give protection, Vaishya from the thighs or the stomach for production, Shudras from legs, service to everyone, service to all the three Varnas. This doesn't, this is natural creation of social order, and it's not something that can be abolished because it's created by the Lord in order for society to function. Just like our bodies to function, we need the head, the arms, the stomach, the legs. Otherwise, the body won't be able to function. So we need all those things. Just like that in society, you need these four classes. And of course, in India or Bharat, this system was somewhat exploited, where the Brahminical class decided that if you are born a Brahmin, you remain a Brahmin, no matter what your actions are. But actually, what Krishna has explained is guna karma. Your qualities and your work, your karma work define who you are, not your birth. Birth has some relevance, but not much. It's more, what are your qualities? So one can be born in a family of Shudras, but be behaving like a Brahmin. And he should be treated like a Brahmin because that's the natural order. So that exploitation, unfortunately, resulted in this skewed caste system. Unfortunately, it's exploitation. So it's not how the Lord intended that to work. So now it's the last few verses. Huh?
Okay, Prabhupada. एतत् क्षत्तर्भगवतो दैवकर्मात्मरूपिणः कः श्रद्धध्यादुपाकर्तुम् योगमायाबलोदयम्.
O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead?
तथापि कीर्तयाम्यङ्ग यथामति यथा श्रुतम् कीर्तिं हरे स्वां सत्कर्तुम् गिरम् अन्याभिधासति.
In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste.
एकान्तलाभं वचसो नपुंसाम् सुश्लोकमौलेर्गुणवादमाहो श्रुतेश्च विद्वद्भिरुपाकृतायां कथासुधायाम् उपसम्प्रयोगम्.
The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them.
Atmano vasito vatsa महिमा कविनादिना संवत्सर सहस्रान्ते धिया योगविपक्कया.
O my son, the original poet Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable.
अतो भगवतो माया मायिनाम् अपि मोहिनी यत् स्वयं चात्मवर्त्मात्मा न वेद किम् उता परे.
The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others.
यतो प्राप्यन्यवर्तन्त वाचश्च मनसा सह अहं चान्य इमे देवास् तस्मै भगवते नमः. हरे कृष्ण.
Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. Thank you.
Haribo, thank you very much. Fabulous. Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th chapter of 3rd Canto Ki Jai.
Yes.
So, thank you so much, Shruti. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So, Maitreya offers obeisances to the Lord, appreciating the inconceivable potencies of the Supreme Lord in the matter of the creation. He said even Brahma, even Lord Brahma, although he lives a long life, the only thing he could understand was the Lord's potencies are inconceivable, i.e. very difficult to understand. So it's very powerful. So Maitreya understood his own ability, although limited due to humility, to describe creation that is given by his spiritual master. So there is a limit because the Lord's potencies are so vast. What to speak of Brahma, even Lord himself, because his potencies are always increasing, may not know the limit of his potencies. So this is the extraordinary, inconceivable nature of the Lord. For unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Then he offers obeisances to the Lord. So what is his unconditioned life? It basically means unconditioned, i.e. We are at the moment conditioned according to the material world. Unfortunately, we are sort of trapped in this world, and we're conditioned to accepting this body as us, the self. We think we are the body, but when we're in unconditioned life, then we've got self-realization. We understand that we are separate from this body. And how to do that? Worship the Supreme Lord under the guidance of a spiritual master. Very important, because the spiritual master reveals himself also, as well as the Supreme Lord. And that revelation is important, because then we can understand our position and the Lord's position, and make our way back home, back to our Supreme Father in due course of time. So I wanted to stop there. Surinder, anything you'd like to add?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat everybody, Nitai Gaura Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Sri Nityananda Chandram Patita Sharanadam Gauradam Tam Bhajiham. Yes, Prabhu, very interesting. So here in detail, it has been explained like all the abilities we as a Jiva soul, we can do in this body, like seeing, hearing, or smelling, or tasting. Everything is possible only by the grace of the Supreme Person of Godhead, Shri Krishna. As the verse in Brahma Samhita goes on, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So the last phrase, Sarva Karana Karanam. Krishna is a cause of all causes. Means everything possible is only happening by the mercy of Sri Krishna and all Krishna's potencies, which are ever expanding. And Ananta Shesha, the expansion of the Lord, the energy of the Lord in the form of Ananta Shesha, also cannot understand and get to the limit of the Lord's ever expanding glories. In this way, so the best advice given at the end is that we should engage in Shuddha Bhakti and always glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and serve Sri Krishna and his devotees under the guidance of our spiritual master. In this way, we will progress and continue our Krishna consciousness. Nitai Gaura Haribol Prabhu, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any question? Thank you so much, Surinder. That was very good. Any questions?
Yes, Prabhuji,
yes. Yes, Kaushalya Maji.
Prabhuji, did we ask Krishna to send us in material world? Did we ask him that?
Effectively, we asked him that because we wanted to enjoy like he is enjoying. We wanted to become the Lord. So just like sometimes the child, he would pretend to be like the father, you know, or the mother. And the father and mother will, you know, like the father and mother is a doctor, for example. You know, they might buy the child some, you know, toy doctors, toy nurses, you know, like that. So the child can play with them. And he can also put on the, what do you call those things, you know, where you hear the heart, and he'd be pretending that he's like a child, you know, like, I mean, like a doctor. So in the same way, we are childlike, you know, we want to enjoy like the Lord is enjoying. And we want to effectively lord over, just like the Lord is in charge of everything. So he creates this world where he gives us that opportunity that, yes, you want to satisfy your desire of controlling, come to the material world. I don't want you to go, but you're insisting that you want to enjoy without me, then I will fulfill your desire. But he made this world in such a way that you can, it's perfectly imperfect, if you see what I mean. It's, you can try to control and enjoy, but you'll always fail because there's something called death. You know, death means everything changes. So in that way, he's made this world in such a way that ultimately we will again look for him. It might take some time, but it's designed in a way that eventually we will again search him out. And he will also, through the spiritual master, through the super soul, through himself coming to this world, show us that, hey, you know, your place you belong to me in the spiritual world. So come back, you know. I don't want you, don't continue to have these desires to enjoy yourself. And of course, it's not that he doesn't want us to enjoy ourselves. Our real enjoyment is when we are with the Lord, serving him. And that service doesn't mean we're serving a ruthless master. The master is actually, he also wants to serve the servant. And there's always a competition going on between the servant and the master. The master is saying to the servant, I want to do something for you. And the servant is saying, no way, I want to do something for you. And in this way, the servant actually starts to control the master, because the master wants to do something for the servant, you know. So, but at the moment, we are thinking, you know, hey, I don't want to be the servant, I want to be the master. And that's why he creates this world for us to live in. So we didn't specifically ask him, but you know, he creates it so that it's made in a way that we go back to him.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that question. Very good. Anybody else? Any questions? Any comments? I'd like to thank Shruti again for a fantastic recitation. You do it
Yes,
so well. It's very, very good. We're very blessed. Thank you.
Thank you. All glory to the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Well done.
Prabhuji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, everybody. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna, Dandavad.
Hare Krishna, Surendra Babu. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.